What are the differences between playing for cents and playing for thousands of dollars in online poker? That's what we're going to see live in this video. We're playing 4 tables here at the moment, and we're playing one table of 1 cent, 2 cent. Then we're playing another table of 10 cent, 25 cent. Then we almost 10x that and play a 1-2 table. And then finally, the last table, the 10-20 table, $2,000 buy-in. Let's have a look throughout the session. What are the differences between these stakes? What is something that you can do at higher stakes but you cannot do at lower stakes? And what are the things that you should do at lower stakes but you cannot actually do at the higher stakes? That's what we're going to see throughout the session. And let's get into the action here because there will be lots to talk about. The first thing we're going to see as obvious differences between these stakes is that, well, it's the lineup composition. So what are the players actually playing each of these limits? We're going to see a very, very clear difference that makes obviously the bulk of the differences between playing these limits, which are who are playing in these games. So while in the 1 cent, 2 cent game, we're going to have plenty of recreational players and generally very many beginners and very inexperienced players in poker. At a 10-20 game, you're talking about very long time pros who have been living off the game for a long time and making quite a lot of money. So that alone already accounts for and is responsible for the bulk of the differences between these limits. But we're also going to talk about how the monetary difference can also have a psychological effect on the players playing each of those limits. Here in the bottom right at 10-20, we're going to go ahead for a bluff here with the 7-6. And on the top left at the 1 cent, 2 cent game, we want to 3-bet the recreational player. We want to play heads up against this player. Take a look at how many hands he's playing. He's playing 47% of hands in the sample. So obviously he's very, very wide. And we're looking to get as many hands as possible against them. 7-6 here, we get check raised. We have to fold. Our bluff didn't go through. And with the pocket aces, we get squeezed by this very tight player. Something we're going to see that is extremely common at these lower stakes. And let's bluff this at the 1-2 game here. My pocket threes got counterfeited. I don't think both of these players have too many 7x's in their range. So we're going to go ahead and bluff, and the bluff gets through. Nice. We get jammed on holding the pocket aces. Pocket ace against kings. Let's see if we can hold. He wants to run it twice. No, thank you. So we're going to see that in these lower stakes games here, we're going to have this player profile, right? The whale player profile, the recreational player who just likes to see flops and plays a bunch of hands. So he takes a hand like king 7 off pre-flop and he calls against an open because he just wants to see a flop. He wants to gamble a little bit. This type of profile gets more and more scarce as you move up in stakes. While at low stakes, there are plenty of people willing to gamble a few bucks. At higher stakes, obviously, there are way less people that are willing to gamble for thousands of dollars. So you see that obvious effect where while in a 1 cent, 2 cent game, I'm always going to find the table with the recreational player. At a 10-20 game, look at what I have to do. I have to do what people call in poker reg battles. I have to play in a table with only regulars and I have to pay a bunch of rake until a fish decides to sit, which is when the game starts to get profitable for us, because while we're just playing 3-handed here, the game is very likely not profitable to all of us, given the high rake that is charged here on GG Poker. So that makes a huge difference to how profitable the game can be for you. If games at higher stakes had a whale at each table at all times, just like low stakes, professional poker players would have a lot more money in their bank accounts. At 10-20 here, we have the 7-5 deuce board texture. This is a texture where being triple low, I'm going to get check raised a decent amount. So with my third pair without any kind of redraw, it is totally fine to go for the check back and basically try to realize my equity. without facing the threat of getting check raised. Although betting a small amount with this hand would probably be fine. The king on the turn is extremely good for me, but still my hand does not want to bet. And the ace on the river is also extremely good for me. We're going to see my opponent checking quite a lot on this card. And he's going to have a bunch of give ups that my equity on showdown is kind of okay. So we check back here. And this time we win against 6 deuce. The queen 8 here in the 25-cent game. We're going to make the call here with the queen 8. Villain bets pot size, which is generally an indicative of strength. But this is the board texture that allows for many missed draws. So we have to make the call. Bottom right, the 10-20 game, we have a 5-4 deuce flop. A very strong flop here for me as the big blind caller. So I am going to have some leads on this texture, basically trying to get him to fold random jack highs, queen highs, and king highs. So the board being so good for me, it allows me to go ahead and start leading some hands in my range. I have the 9 of hearts and the 8 of clubs here, which is very helpful because I block hands that have a backdoor flush draw that might want to continue. If I had a diamond in my hand, for example, I would have less fold equity, which means that it would be a less interesting hand to lead with. And these are the kind of details that start to matter a lot at these stakes. So how you actually pick your combos, how you actually build your strategy, and going into the details of combo selection is going to matter at these stakes. Whereas if you're playing a 1 cent, 2 cent game, this actually doesn't matter at all. So when you watch videos in the internet and you see a lot of people, a lot of YouTubers and coaches and everything talking about blockers and all those nuances of the game, this definitely matters at higher stakes, but it doesn't matter at all at micro stakes. So this is something that I can definitely tell you in this video that you can take with you for when you're grinding, especially online. Don't take all of the advanced stuff you see on the internet and try to apply at micro stakes, particularly these advanced nuances of picking the specific blockers and knowing how having a blocker to backdoor flush draw or an unblocker actually matters to your fold equity. All of that starts to matter for sure in a game like 10-20, but in a game like 1 cent, 2 cent, or even in a game like this 25 cent, 10 cent, it's just not something you should be concerned with at all, and you should focus on the macro understanding of strategies. In the 25 NL game here, we are playing against a fish here, and he 3-bats me pre-flop. He 3-bats, I call with the suited connector. He checks back the flop. Recreational players don't fold much in this line, so that's why I just gave up here with the 6-5. I generally, however, do like to bluff recreational players a lot. This is something you're going to see happening throughout this video, where I'm going to be taking complete garbage hands and I'm going to be trying to bluff the recreational players. And this works because recreational players have very wide ranges, and even though they do have a tendency to call more than regulars, they still fold enough so that your bluffs are going to be profitable. So regardless of the stake, you guys are going to see me trying to bluff recreational players whenever I think, of course, it's going to be profitable. We open this ace-4 offsuit hand here in the 10-20 table against regular. Flop is king, jack 5, 2 clubs. And here there are 2 ways you can play this board texture. You can play it with the big size for the c-bet, or you can play it with the small size. Both are totally viable here on this board texture because I have a significant advantage compared to my opponent's range. I have all of the high cards, whereas he would 3-bet most of his high cards. When the turn comes, a third to flush, I have the 4 clubs, which is really nice, and I have the ace of diamonds, which should unblock a lot of the folds he's going to have in his range. A lot of the hands that he floats and then folds the turn with are going to be spade hands, and then, of course, some 1 pair hands that are weak. He makes the call, and now we make a straight on the river. Question now is, how big can we bet with this hand? Given that the board is a third to flush and a 4 to straight, generally only small sizes are going to make sense. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bet a third of the pot, and I'm going to call a raise if he does raise. In the bottom left, you guys see that I played a very loose hand where I called a 3-bet. against this recreational player with Jack 6, and then I floated the flop and the turn. Pre-flop and on the flop, I'm making an exploitative play here against a recreational player where I want to be calling quite wide because I know these players make a lot of mistakes. On the turn, I just make an open-ender, so I have an easy call against a medium bet. And now once he jams and I didn't pick up on my equity, I have to fold. But you're also going to see throughout this video me floating very wide against recreational players, calling very wide pre-flop, floating very wide on the flop, because these players are making so many mistakes that we are incentivized to adjust our ranges and essentially just see more turns and rivers. We already have 50 people watching us today. It's really awesome. If you're new here, if it's the first time that you're watching my channel, make sure to subscribe and make sure that once we're done with the stream here, you go ahead and watch my other videos. I have quite a lot of valuable videos here if you take poker seriously, so I'm pretty sure you can take value out of them if later you decide to reserve some time to watch them. Sort by the most viewed, and I'm pretty sure you're going to see at least a video that interests you and can generate value to your poker journey. We continue the action here. We have this ace-3 offsuit in a multi-way pot. We're playing again against two recreational players. We make a weak flush on the turn here. We can't really get called by all that many worse hands, so we can check. Betting is small would also be fine here. The recreational players will still call with the one pair hand here, but most of the time we're gonna have to check the river. Now once they both check, we do have a hand worth a value bet, so we're just gonna bet a size that we think they're not going to fold if they have a 5 or a deuce or a jack. So kind of half pot here I think is a good bet sizing, but they both fold. We have ace-8 offsuit here on the top right, which is the 25NL table. We have a recreational player to our left, so we have to tag this guy right here. At the 1 cent, 2 cent, I'm gonna be opening super wide against someone who's playing only 18% of hands. We're going to see that quite a lot at these micro stakes. Players are going to be either super wide or super tight. They still haven't learned how they should be somewhere in between. So they're either super wide or super tight, and against the super tight players, we're going to exploit them by opening super wide pre-flop. Right, so 3 deuce suited is not a hand you typically want to open from the small blind, but against a player who's is folding a ton, not 3-betting at all, we are going to make money with this hand. With the ace-8 here against the 44 VPIP fish, we call choose streets here against a player. Wow, look at how passive he played this hand. We call choose streets with the ace-8 here, just waiting for the fish to make a big mistake. If we hit an ace or an 8, we're going to have a profitable call down because they bluff a lot with these donk lines. And had he given up, we would have a lot of equity on showdown. But instead, he decided to bet pot on the river, and against pot, we can't really bluff catch. Recreational players have the obvious tendency of betting big with their good hands and betting medium or small with their worse hands. So we're going to pay a lot of attention to bet sizing tails at these lower limits. The lower the limit, the more your opponents are going to display bet sizing tails, and those start to become way less frequent at higher stakes. At a 10-20 game, for example, you will see some bet sizing tails by the professionals and the regulars, but those are going to be way less common than at a lower stake game. So we're going to pay a lot of attention to how big our opponents are choosing to bet. And if we ever get information from Showdown, we're going to be taking notes of that. That's an extremely important habit if you take poker seriously, is to take notes on your opponents. If you intend on playing a table for a long time, and here we're going to be playing through the stream here for the next 3.5 hours, we want to develop some reads on our opponents. So whatever we can find of information, we're going to make a note. Bottom left at the 200 now game, we see bet the flop monotone. You don't have to see bet this flop if you don't want to. It's not a flop that you need to bet high frequency. But we have top 2 pairs, so we decided to bet. We check the turn and we call a small bet, super standard. In the 25-0 game against a tight player with just bottom pair, we're going to make this fold here. Triple Broadway board is typically a board texture in which people will not find the appropriate amount of bluffs, especially at these lower stakes. Essentially here, if you want to have a balanced range, and given that you have so many strong hands, you have so many high cards in the range, so many 2 pairs, straights, and sets, in order for you to bluff appropriately, you're going to have to use some air combinations, some just like complete garbage air, like 9-8 suited. And you're also going to have to use some low pockets. Some low pockets are going to be part of your bluffing strategy. But those are non-intuitive hands that people don't often use in their strategy. So it's totally fine for you to just overfold. A6 here at the 1-2 game. Decided to bluff catch here with my top 2 pair. My opponent used an overbet on the river. I think this opponent is a regular, not a fish. And therefore, I'm not going to be so scared of overbets like I would be against a fish. If I'm playing against, let's say, a 40 VPIP fish who just plays 40/20, I would fold this A6 because overbets from fishes are very, very under bluffed. However, regulars really like using overbets as bluffs, so it's totally fine to make the call against the regular. At the 10-20 game, we do have now a whale at our table. Look at that. That is awesome. We have a guy that played 6 out of 10 hands. So that's awesome. And we have him directly to our right here, 1 seat to our right, which makes us be in position every time that he VPIPs, or almost every time that he VPIPs, we're going to be in position. And obviously position is extremely important in poker. When you can have position over someone, you're going to have more information to work with, so you're going to make less mistakes than them, which obviously translates to generating edge. So the seats at the table are actually relevant for how much money you're going to make at the table. This is what people call seat selection in poker. So if I have this fish, for example, on my left, every time I VPIP, he's actually in position. So he will be able to act after me, and he's gonna have more actualization than I will have. So seat selection and the position relative to the other players is quite relevant, and this also applies to the other pros or regulars in your game. So if you have someone that is very good and they're on your left, if they have position on you, you're going to suffer a little bit. And if you have someone who is not a fish, but you consider them to be a bit worse than you, you will be able to take advantage of the fact you have position. Very interesting here that this 25-0 game, the table is not full. So the site has so many players playing these games that a lot of times we're going to have a table with the fish that does not fill up. Such thing absolutely never happens at a higher stake. You guys are going to notice, and you probably did notice, or if you rewind back here a few minutes in the stream, whenever the recreational player sits in a high stake game, you will see the table immediately filling up, and it's going to fill up super fast. Basically, all the regulars are waiting for the fish to sit. So whenever the fish sits, everyone runs for their chair, right? At a lower stake game, because there are so many tables out there, we're often going to see tables running with the fish without filling for a long time. We flopped top 2 pair here in the 10-20 game. I have this player marked as a weaker type of regular, a bit more on the passive side. What this means in practice is that this player is not going to barrel aggressively enough over future streets, which simply makes me want to fast play my strong hands right now. If I don't expect him to put enough money into the pot over the next streets, then the value of slow playing decreases and I should just put the money in myself. I'm saying this because if you study with solvers, you see that your strong hands should typically mix between calling and raising. You shouldn't play the same way with all of your hands all the time. You should sometimes raise, should sometimes call. But this is under the assumption that your opponent is playing balanced. If all of a sudden they don't play balanced, you're gonna want to change it up your strategy. And in this case, I think fast play is the way to go. The queen on the turn here is not ideal, but we have less than a pot size bet left. We need to stick it in here. There's not much we can do. We are going to lose to ace queen and pocket queen sometimes, and maybe 10-9 suited if he has it. But given the stack death, there's no way we can check fold, so we need to stick it in. He shows up with the same hand. He actually tanked a little bit before calling, showing how difficult this spot may look. And we're going to split it up. We have some guys with us already. We have King Kong GX Daza. Holy microstakes, amigo. And we have Euro Dream saying hello, beautiful. What's up, my friend? How are you doing today? Hope you're having a good day. And hope you have separated the next 3 hours to be here with me to watch the stream in full, where we're comparing how a 1 cent, 2 cent game, how a $2 game plays compared to a $2,000 game. We flop bottom set against the whale here on 5-3 deuce. He c-bet 3/4 pot. That's an amazing situation for us because once whales commit money to the pot, they do not like to let it go. So we're often going to look into a big pot here. Technically, we don't have the nuts. We are losing to a number of hands. But a whale plays so many hands that we have to stack off here and hope that he has some kind of 2-pair or an overpair. Let's see what he's got. He's got 9-8 offsuit. Jesus. So this is one thing that does not change according to the stake. Whales will be whales. So this is one reason why high stakes is so profitable, or the main reason why high stakes poker is so profitable. A lot of people don't realize that these types of players exist at higher stakes. And here you can see a player stacking off for 60 blinds was $1,200. So he stacked off with $1,200 with just 9 high on the flop for no reason whatsoever. This shows how high stakes can be profitable. So high stakes players don't make money by just playing against pros. They make money because there are fish in the games. On the top left here, we're going to open it up with the ace king. I'm bumping my bet size here because I want to charge more with my ace king, and I don't want to have many players cold calling and building a multi-way pot as these $2 game players will often do. So we open to 3x, we get this king 5 deuce texture. This is a texture where you should just c-bet any 2 cards for a small size. Don't make it fancy. Don't try to do anything different than what the theory suggests, and the theory suggests high frequency c-bet on king high dry boards. Right, so we just go for the c-bet, opponent folds, and we move on to the next one. We have king jack offsuit here in the bottom left. We open, no one wants it. Interestingly, this is a 1-2 table with a bunch of weaker players. This player here, okay, now this player is a regular. He has 39 VPIP, I guess, because the table was short-handed before. But we have one player here playing 50/33. Have another player here on the left who I think is a regular, but may not be. He's playing 38-25. So we need to pay attention to these players to try and figure out their exact profiles. So far, we're still not sure. We're not sure about the profile of a few of these players. We need to collect more statistics and also pay attention to their showdowns. This is something that is really important in live poker, but is also important in online poker. And one could argue that it's even more important online because it's the only piece of information that you have a lot of the time. Whereas live, you have the player's expression, you have the player's posture and everything. You have other piece of information. Here we're simply working with whatever people show up at showdown. On the bottom left, the 10-20 game, you saw me 3-betting the pocket nines against the whale, and then I c-bet on king queen 4. This is very, very standard, as this board is extremely good for me. In pocket nines, you know, if you decide to check back, you end up with a very face-up range. So we just want to bet small here and take it down, right? By taking down the pot, we avoid getting bluffed. So pocket nines should just belong to our c-bet range, unless you think your opponent is so passive that if you check back, he never bluffs you off. If you think that's the case, then checking back could in fact become the best play. Let's do the same here on ace-6-5. Although this time checking back could be even more appealing, because recreational players, when they stab on the turn, they have an insanely weak range. So a king high on an ace high board would actually be super comfortable with continuing against the probe, meaning that it's actually hard for him to bluff us off. We get a river that completes a flush and completes some straights. He snap pots the river. So again, I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to the bet sizes. And the pot size is one that I will not be calling much against. But against other bet sizes, I will be very, very sticky. I think I would still call against this pot size with a pair in my hand. If I had a 5 or a 6. But with just king high, feels a little too thin, especially for an ace-x paired board. These are typically boards that get bluffed less often. So even though we're playing against a whale who can technically overbluff any line, any spot, we're still going to be careful when they decide to bet the full pot. Top right, we're playing against a regular most likely here, and we have an ace-4-3 rainbow texture. Technically, ace low textures are not amazing for you to be c-betting on, because the in-position player has some 2 pairs and straights that you may not have yourself. For instance, I'm not going to be opening with ace-3 off, or I shouldn't open with ace-3 off in theory, but he might be calling with ace-3 off pre-flop. So he has an advantage on 2 pairs straights. Basically 2 pairs and straights, so it's technically not the best board to be c-betting aggressively on. But because regulars will overfold a lot to flop c-bet, it's totally fine for you to use those hands as c-bets. Now on the turn here, I'm going to make an advanced play, which is to take my 9 and turn it into a bluff. Now here, this is an exploit. I don't think theory is going to be using this hand as a bluff here very often, especially because my opponent could still technically be uncapped. However, this is a situation where once he bets half pot, he could be displaying a sizing tell, basically just betting a6, a7 type hands. And I do believe I can get a6, a7 to fold by the river if I go with a bomb check raise into a overbet on the river. This time it seems like he had a strong hand, and we are fucked. But that's the idea. We have a hand that blocks 2 pair, which is nice. So here, when we're talking about getting him to fold an ace, I don't want him to have ace-9, right? I don't want him to have 9-4. So it's nice to block those hands, and as I said, the half pot sizing could be an indicative of a very specific region, and we can get that region to fold by the time we get to the river. Didn't work this time, but it's fine. Plays are not supposed to work every single time, and we have to get used to that when we're playing poker. We have to get used with the fact that you may make a good play, but in that instance it may not work, and you just have to keep going and keep trying. We have an ace-10 here on the bottom left table against this apparently wide fish. For some reason, I have him marked as a tight fish, so I'm getting mixed signals here against this player, where I have him tagged as a profile that he's He's behaving against my tag. So again, I need to pay attention to what he's doing. We have some more guys here in the chat. Otávio saying, GL Saulo, thank you, my friend. We have Fat King Louie watching us over Twitch, saying hello Saulo, great stream yesterday. Thank you, my friend. I'm glad you enjoyed. And Otávio asking, are you playing 25NL? I'm playing 4 different stakes here. So we're playing 2NL on the top left table. We're playing 25NL in the top right table. We're playing 200NL in the bottom left table. And we're playing 2KNL in the bottom right table. So we're playing all the stakes here, almost 10xing with each stake jump, right? So we're going from $2 to $25, $25 to $200, and $200 to $2,000 game. We have micro stakes, we have low stakes, we have mid stakes, and we have high stakes. Bottom left at the $200 game, we have King Queen suited. We're gonna be 3-betting against this regulars, playing 27/27. So far, he's only entered hands by raising. We get the fold. On the top right at the $25 game, we have Ace-7 of clubs. We isolated the recreational player who limped under the gun. And then we were cold called by the big blind, who leads on Queen 3. Kind of a weird lead here by the big blind, but we just have a garbage hand. We fold and move on. With Ace-10 here at the $2 game, we see bet against a very tight player. On Ace-10-5, we got the top 2 pair. We're gonna re-raise here. Ace-10, we're stacking off 60-40. That's a sick one. Seems like the 200NL table could break soon. We were lucky enough to hold our Ace-10 against King Queen of Spades. Now I've got King 10 of clubs from the small blind. Player opens from the hijack. The opener is playing 36/25. Typical recreational player stats. We're gonna go for the squeeze here with our suited Broadway. These are gonna play extremely well post flop. We're not gonna get all that much fold equity because recreational players do not like folding to a 3-bet. And I would imagine at such a micro stake game, they just want to see a flop. So we're likely to see at least one of these players calling. He did throw the emoji there, which is funny. And both of them fold. That's nice. That's why it's important to be aggressive. We get down the pot uncontested. The bottom left here at the $200 game, we faced a 4-bet from regular here on the button. We made the call with ace-10 suited. That's pretty standard in these positions, button versus small blind. We're going to be 3-betting our suited broadways, and against a 4-bet, we're going to be calling most of our suited broadways. Flop is pretty decent in a sense that we're going to have quite a lot of broadways in our range. Although villain is supposed to be 4-betting with a bunch of Jack-X combinations, like King Jack offsuit hands. We're gonna make the call here with our middle pair. But it's not gonna be a board texture that we're gonna be able to call down profitably. Because again, their pre-flop bluffs mostly hit this region. So our hope here is that he checks back ace king and we get to showdown. But given how much he tanked here, it's unlikely to happen. Turn is already close here in practice. In theory, we have a standard call. In practice, it's already a bit close. But we're going to call here and probably fold the river. The top right, we 3-bet the ace king suited. Top left, easy 3-bet with the ace queen off against recreational player. You want to be 3-betting very, very wide against recreational players, but almost always with a linear range. So you don't want to 3-bet offsuit garbage. You don't want to 3-bet suited garbage. You want to 3-bet pocket pairs. You want to 3-bet suited connected hands. You want to 3-bet strong high cards. You're going to do that all the time against recreational players. They're not gonna fold pre-flop, therefore you want to have some equity to push against their range for post-flop. Right, so make sure to 3-bet very wide, but it's always very linear against recreational players. On the right here we have a 3-bet, a code 4-bet, and a jam. Easy fold with the Jack-10 suited. This guy here essentially has pocket queens or better. He shows up with pocket aces. The pocket queens cannot fold here because this guy is going to have ace king. But it's definitely not a dream spot for queens. What is the highest stake you generally play? 10-20 is exactly the highest stake you will see me playing. You will often see me in the 2, 5, 5, 10 games, and then if there's a good 10-20 game, you may see me there. This one, for example, is a very good table, so if I can get my hands on a table like this, it's definitely worth seating. We have a 65 VPAP whale here on our right. So that's the exactly kind of game we're looking for. We're playing a game like 10-20. With the 9-8 of spades here, we flop the king 4-3. Any board with 2 low cards is typically good for the in-position player. He has a higher concentration of low to middling cards in his range than I have in mine. My range is more concentrated on higher cards. His range is more concentrated on middling to low cards. So we have to check here, and we have an easy fold. $25 and out game, we see a 65/5 player straight up betting full pot on a dry board. So this is going to be indicative of a lot of strength, because this player, he only enters the pots by calling. He only raises 5% of the time, and then all of a sudden he wants to play aggressively. This is obviously a huge tell, and you gotta be extremely careful when these super passive players suddenly decide to bet pot on the flop. So even though I had a pair, these are not situations that you should be bluff catching with mediocre hands. Definitely not against this profile. So all of that is extremely relevant at all stakes. So there are some things that are not going to change regardless of the stake you're playing, and one of them is, of course, tailoring your strategy according to your opponents. That is never going to change. That is always going to be extremely important. We see bet 3/4 pot here on queen 9-3, and then when the board pairs or opponent leads, we're going to make the fold here and respect the fact that he's super tight. He's playing 20/12. So again, whenever these super tight and passive players display aggression, you should give them credit for having a strong hand. That's what they do, right? They play super passively until they hit a strong hand, and then they want to put money into the pot. Our job is to punish them for the fact that they are too tight and over bluff them whenever they are not displaying an interest in the pot. That's our job, to play very aggressively when they do not show interest in the pot. Top right, we open ace-9 offsuit, get a fold. And we get out ace-king in the next hand. We have a fairly good table here with the fish there, a fish here. We see a player cold calling this huge open from under the gun. There are not many hands you're gonna want to cold call when a passive player opens so big like this. Should mostly enter by raising. We're gonna try and get stacks in here. He straight up snap jams. Let's see what he has. Shows up with the solid 10 deuce of clubs. So this is a beautiful part about recreational players. Recreational players are quite random. So this guy has played 24 hands, and he's basically only raised before one time, and then out of nowhere he raises for pot size with 10 deuce of clubs, and he stacks off for 27 big blinds. It's something that you wouldn't expect by looking at how he has behaved so far, but out of nowhere, because he's tired, because he just wants to leave, maybe he just starts behaving erratically. So you can never underestimate recreational players, and you can never assign them a logical range. I see players making this mistake a lot of the time, where they're playing a spot and they're like, this player never has bluffs here, never has a weak hand here, and they have that rationalization because they are projecting how they would have played that spot into their opponents, but they forget about the randomness factor of recreational players. You cannot assign them a proper range. They're going to be playing hands in completely random ways from time to time. Pocket queens here in the $2 game. There's a line you can print money with against wide players, which is to bet the flop, check back the turn, and then call their bets on the river. They have such a wide range calling pre-flop and on the flop that they feel so tempted of taking down the pot when you check. So this line here is extremely over bluffed. So he just called an ace-jack offsuit out of nowhere on the flop. This hand had no business calling the flop. But because they sized it small, he's gonna want to call with whatever garbage hand he has. And when I display passiveness by checking the turn, he tries to take down the pot on the river. So against recreational players, whenever you have a hand that cannot go for 3 streets of value, you should be checking the turn just to capture the overbluff by the river. This is a major profitable line against recreational players. Check your middling hand on the turn and then collect the money from their overbluffs on the river. You're only not going to call the river bet if it's an overbet. If they bet really huge, then it's not going to be overbluffed anymore. But if they bet below pot, you have a fairly easy call. 7-6 offsuit here against Super Nit playing 19/11. Generally, you want to tighten up your range when you're playing against someone that is this tight. At the same time, these players, I think I'm gonna fold this ace-jack suit against this huge 3-bet. 15 big blind 3-bet is very uncommon. Recreational players typically 3-bet to 8 big blinds, 9 big blinds. He decided to 3-bet to 15. So we gotta give him a little bit of credit. As I said, bet sizing tells are going to be extremely relevant at low stakes, at higher stakes as well. So we're going to give him credit for having a hand. I was talking about the tight player. Yeah, so the tight player, because he's so tight, you would think, well, I'm going to fold a lot against them when they raise, right? And this is definitely the standard way to think about it. But these players will also be very passive post-flop. Their pre-flop passivity also translates to post-flop passivity, which means that these players are not going to bluff you off when you have a middling hand. They're going to play so passively that when they don't have it, they're going to let you take down the pot. So this also increases the EV of calling pre-flop. So in one hand, you want to tighten up because their range is stronger. On another hand, they're not taking advantage of their strong range. So because they have a strong range, they could be playing very aggressively with their bluffs. They are so protected with value hands that post-flop, they could be playing super aggressive with their bluffs, but they don't do that often enough, which means that the fact that they are tighter doesn't automatically mean you should play super tight pre-flop against them. At the bottom left, at the 1-2 game, we defended pocket sixes against a 3-bet here. We have a player that's playing more on the aggressive side. Now I'm starting to think that this player is actually a regular. Pocket sixes cannot continue here against this bet size on the turn. We would much prefer to have a 7 or a 9 to have a pair on the board and have more outs to improve. We have to fold the turn, unfortunately. On the top right, the $25 game, we have a bet and a call, so this is already not a great spot for aces because we might be ahead now, but the board is so connected that because we're playing against 2 players, that the chances that a card is going to come out that is going to make our hand become worse is extremely high, right? So we're talking any card that pairs the board can give people trips, any card making a 4 to straight, any card making a 3rd to flush. The only reason I'm not going to give up is that players at these limits, they may overplay their hands. Therefore, we still have equity here to continue. But against stronger opposition that correctly understands the difference in range strength here, you may not have a call on the turn. We have here a super blank run out, which is awesome. Now we're only going to face a bet if these players have 2 pair or better. I don't think anyone here is going to bet just the king. So let's see, we have pole 7-7-7. He checks. We have king 6 against 7-6. Nice, we take down this one. And on the top left, we have an easy value bet with our king queen. We get snapped by jack 10. We face a limp here from the small blind at 25-0 game. Very typical behavior of recreational players. With this high rake structure, it's unlikely that limping is part of a good theoretical strategy. So we're likely facing a fish. Once he checks, he's going to have a very weak range. We're going to bet and take down the pot. This is something that you can and should do regardless of stakes. When people that play very face up demonstrate no interest in the pot, well, just take it for yourself. So in that hand here, I would have stabbed not just hands like this that have a lot of equity, but whatever garbage you have there, you can very safely stab against someone who has displayed passivity. Bottom left, we got the pocket sixes in the $200 game, and we flop middle set. We're likely gonna see, I was gonna say that we're likely gonna see a check. He does decide to see bet here, which I think makes his range stronger. I think on these low connected boards, people typically like to play them more passively. When he c bets, I think he's going to be in balance towards a strong hand. So I'm going to raise here because I think he's not going to fold much. On the top right, facing the small donk lead, I'm going to be playing aggressively here with my ace-10. This is basically a board that favors me a lot compared to my opponent. So I'm going to be putting a lot of pressure. This is something that a passive player may not do. A passive player may look at a hand like ace-10 and he might be like, I'm just going to call this and not put enough pressure, and then they allow the other position player to see a river for a very cheap price. So that's what I was saying, how playing as passive players, you have extra equity realization. If the guy doesn't raise you here, let's say you have hearts, you get to see the river by just taking a cheap stab for 2 blinds, whereas the correct here for him would be to put 10 blinds into the pot as the aggressor. But we're not going to let them have it. We're going to play quite aggressively on these boards where we have an advantage. Ace queen here against someone that has played super tight. We're going to fold. You can call here if you have 1 heart for the backdoor flush draw, but without a heart, safe to fold and move on to the next hand. Hey boss, why don't you play Russian cash on Friday for extra drops? It's more AV for you on Fridays. So I don't really care much about that, honestly. I'm not playing for the EV itself, although obviously I want to make money. But if I want to focus on making money, I'm just gonna play off stream, right? Where I'm not distracted, where I don't have to spend this huge amount of energy to entertain and educate you guys. If I'm focused on making money, I will either play off stream or I'll stream with just the mic and camera off. But here the purpose is to make an entertaining educational content for you guys to keep growing my channel, right? That's the goal here. So it's just about priorities, right? Nine-eight suited here. When we have a player more on the passive side on the big blind, you can make more flats, as basically are betting on the idea of getting squeezed less often. If you're getting squeezed less often, you're going to see a flop more often, which just increases the EV of calling. We do see a fold from the big blind. This board is okay for us here. Remember how I said before that when the board contains 2 low cards, it's very good for the imposition code caller. The imposition code caller is supposed to have more low cards, a higher density of lower cards in its range than the open razor. Now here with the 9-8 of clubs, I have a pretty garbage hand in terms of just having no equity and having pretty poor blocker effects. So I'm going to take a stab sometimes with this hand, but not often at all. And I would much rather take a stab with a hand that contains a suit on the board. My opponent here decides to overbet for 2x spot on the turn. I think he has quite a lot of draws here in this range, and I do have pocket 9s in my range. So I'm gonna call here with the hopes that on most blanks, he's going to give up with his missed draws. The King of Diamonds, however, is pretty much the worst card possible. It completes his King Jack, King 10 bluffs, it completes Jack 10, it completes diamonds. So there's nothing we can do here apart from folding and moving to the next hand. Notice how that fish that we had on our right here, the 65 VPIP fish, already laughed the table. This is the life at high stakes. The fishes may lose their money very quickly, and then they quit the table, and all you're left with are the regulars, and you have to go back at reg battling until a new fish decides to seed. Fortunately, there's nothing we can do. We could just close this table and try to find a new one, but tables are going to be scarce at these limits, and even if we move to a new table, we're still gonna have to wait for the fish to sit. We 3-bet here pocket kings against under the gun, and we face a 4-bet. Here we can either call or jam, with I think calling being the preferred option by the solver. Although jamming would be completely fine because villain does have pocket queens and ace king in his 4-bet range, and if I jam, he has to call with those hands. Flop containing quite a lot of low cards here is not really a problem for the aggressor because I don't really have low cards in my range. But he should play a half pot or check strategy, and he should definitely check some broadways on this board. Then to balance that range, he's gonna check some pocket aces, and that's it. Basically, his checking range are some king jacks, king queen suiteds, and then some pocket aces, ace queen. That's his range. The $2 game, we flopped top 2 pair against our short stacked opponent. Let's try to get all the money in. Look at who we have at the 1-2 game, the $200 game. The legendary Stefan Burakov. Stefan Burakov grinding the $200 games. We got check raised here by our Russian player at the 4-bet pot. We're not really folding our pocket kings here, so we're going to jam it in. We're gonna hope he has some kind of underpair. He plays the pocket 10s in the check raise line. That's interesting. To me, that seems a little bit thin, to be honest. He went with the small check raise with the pocket 10s. Not sure about this play. We just have to fade 2 10s on the river. And we do. Nice. $2,000 to our bankroll in this hand. That's awesome. Bit of a cooler, but you could say he could have avoided, to be honest. I think just check calling the flop or even c-betting himself are probably better than going for the check raise line. The check raise line, a little bit ambitious in my opinion. King Jack offsuit here in the 10-20 game, you're gonna have to do something that you don't have to do at lower stake game, which is to construct appropriate 3-bet size. You see that I used the RNG to decide whether I was going to call or 3-bet with the King Jack offsuit. King Jack offsuit is a hand that, if you look at a GTO preflop solution, you're going to see that it is a hand that should be 3-betting sometimes and calling sometimes. Against players at these limits, we should definitely be concerned with constructing appropriate preflop ranges to the point that we're not going to be super exploitable. So we're going to use the RNG to construct those 3-bet ranges. King Jack is going to be a medium to low frequency 3-bet, so that's what I did with the RNG. Now, if you're playing a $2 game or a $25 game, you do not need to be concerned with that at all. RNG preflop decisions at a $2 game or a $25 game would be a complete waste of time and brain power. Okay, so don't do that if you're playing a $2 game or if you're playing a $25 game. If you're playing a $2,000 game, I do think it starts to become relevant. King Jack here, this player might be bluffing with ace high, so we cannot call King Jack, and we do not have any meaningful properties to use the check raise bluff. Now, this is a hand that I very much like using check raise bluffs, and what are the hands that you're going to check raise bluff with when you're playing a situation like this? You want to check raise bluff with a pair. So if you have a 3 or a deuce or a 7, those are going to be pretty good bluff raise candidates. The idea is that when you're bluff raising, you don't want to share cards with your opponent's bluffing region. And of course, your opponent is not going to be turning a pair into a bluff. He can just check back and realize his equity. So when you have a pair here, you have an actual great candidate for a check raise bluff. And of course, for value, you're going to have basically the king of diamonds or better. Maybe the jack of diamonds can make it into the cut as well. So essentially, you check raise some flushes, jack of diamonds or better. And as a bluff, you're going to pick some deuce X, 3X, 7X, maybe even 8X hands. We've got ace king suited in the $2,000 game. And we got 8 deuce suited at the $25 game. At the $25 game, I'm going to do something that I would not do in the $2,000 game. I'm going to be opening with some very weak hands. I'm going to do that because my opponents are not going to 3-bet me enough when I do that. And I'm also going to have a lot of edge post-flop, which makes me want to significantly expand my ranges. At the $2,000 game, I may not have any edge whatsoever against a lot of the players, so I'm actually going to be playing a more defensive strategy quite a lot of the time. There might still be situations where you can develop a significant edge against someone and expand your range might make sense. But in general, at a lower stake game, if you're studying and putting effort into improving, there are going to be lots of situations where you have edge over your opponents. And in those situations, you're going to want to play an attacking strategy. A strategy where you go for the kill, basically. Whereas at a 10-20 game where a lot of the players are very strong and maybe a lot of these players are stronger than you, you're going to have a more defensive approach. Basically, you're going to be trying to minimize your own mistakes. At a lower stake game, the focus is on maximizing your opponent's mistakes and punishing them for their mistakes. At a higher stake game, a lot of the time the focus is on minimizing your own mistakes. It's of course not a rule, and even at higher stakes, you still have a lot of opportunities for exploitation. So it's just a matter of playing the player. What was this line here? We raise, check, check. I check call the turn. He overbets the river. So he's essentially saying he's got ace king or kings. That's weird. Let's see if he has kings. Okay, pocket threes. I didn't see the possibility of the pocket threes, but I guess I should have just given him credit for the overbet. This player has been playing pretty tight so far, so tough to say whether he's going to have the balls to find overbet bluffs in a situation like this. Yeah, in fact, I don't like my call, to be honest. I just thought that it smelled off because of the very tiny value region, but that doesn't matter much when the profile is just not gonna find bluffs on an ace high board where my range has a bunch of ace X, right? So I made a mistake there, and this is a mistake you absolutely cannot afford to make. It's very difficult not to make it, as I just made one myself. So I am going to give you the fact that you're gonna struggle to get to a point where you reduce mistakes like this to almost zero. But the idea is that if you're playing spots where it's very hard for opponents to have bluffs, just fold and move on to the next hand. King 6 suited. The 3-bet is on the smaller side, so I'm gonna allow myself to call a bit more here than I would otherwise do. King 6 suited, you are going to find it sometimes a GTO solution making the call with it, but it's obviously in general a weak hand. But because of the small size, I guess we can call. Flop, we have one over card with the gut shot and a backdoor flush draw. Not much, to be honest, on a board like this, but should be reasonable to float once and then perhaps have the opportunity to bluff if he checks. He double barrels on a top card pairing the board. We're gonna fold here very, very easily. On the bottom right, we have Queen Jack, the c-bets the flop, checks back the turn. The river is the ace of hearts, and my opponent bluffs for 3/4 pot. I'm gonna call here because I think he still has some offsuit hands and some spade hands that can bluff. And he doesn't really have all that many hands that want to bet for the 3/4 size, right? I don't think he would use the size with naked ace-x combinations like ace-4 and ace-3. I don't think he takes the size with those hands. So he's basically saying he's got some kind of 2-pair hand. Because also his straights and flushes could bet even bigger, or even go for the check raise. So if he starts splitting his range into multiple options, this could be a situation where he gets exploitable with one of their bet sizes. So imagine he has one over bet size for straights and flushes. Imagine he wants to get tricky and check raise some of those hands. By the time he bets specifically 3/4 pot, it might be that he doesn't have all that many strong hands, especially when naked ace-x does not want to bet the size, right? Naked ace-x would most likely either bet small or check, right? So you see how even at higher stakes, sometimes there might be exploitative opportunities. Mostly in situations like this where splitting a range is actually quite hard to do in a way that doesn't expose you to some serious imbalances. King Queen offsuit here. I'm going to make a stubborn call here on the turn. And this King 8, I'm gonna fold against the limp 3-bet. The limp 3-bet from recreational players is extremely, extremely strong. You guys probably already have that intuition when you're playing poker. So if a recreational player plays limp 3-bet, just run for the hills. Let's try a bluff raise here with the King Queen offsuit. Our opponent snap jams on our face. It shows up with the nuts. Makes sense. But that river pairing the board, obviously a good opportunity as we have quite a lot of trips combinations in our range. and our opponent is not gonna have 8x betting the flop, betting the turn most importantly. The flop he might bet, but the turn not so much. Can you explain 3-bet sizing, small blind versus big blind? What is there to explain about that? Basically, you look at what the solver does, and unless you have a very good reason to deviate from that, you just use what the software suggests, right? And for big blind versus small blind, what you'll typically see is that a 10 big blind 3-bet is the way to go. And this we're talking 100 big blinds deep. So if you're playing 100 big blinds deep cash game, then 3-betting to 10 big blinds is generally accepted as the go-to size. But realize that the 3-bet size is a function of stack depth. So if you're playing with a shorter stack or if you're playing deeper, this 3-bet size may change. Generally speaking, at lower stack depths, you're going to 3-bet to smaller sizes, and at higher stack depths, you're going to 3-bet to bigger sizes. King 8 offsuit here in the bottom right is the weakest hand I would open against a strong player in the big blind, and to be honest, you might want to tighten up a little bit, because playing out of position with the wide range is extremely hard. So a strong player in position is gonna have ways to play better than you. So if you actually want to play tighter to avoid playing these situations, and basically if you don't think you can actually realize the EV of the bottom hands in your range, it's totally fine to play a little bit tighter against a strong player. So these are things that I'm mostly only going to be doing at a higher stake to tighten up my range, because I think my opponent is very good and I don't think the bottom hands in my range are going to perform. This is something I'm only going to consider doing at a higher stake. At a lower stake, unless someone proves to me that they're really strong, I'm gonna be assuming I will be able to push my equity. Pocket threes here, we see bet 3/4 pot on the bottom right table, and we get this deuce of diamonds on the turn. Now this is the time to start building the pot by using a big bet size. And king 10 here, I'm going to fold against the click. Although there might be some smart asses out there watching the stream that want to get fancy. We saw some of those yesterday. People trying to run weird bluffs just so they can show up on the stream. But typically speaking, click raises, and this is a recreational player actually. So click raises from recreational players are extremely strong, especially on the turn, but also on the river for the most part. So you're advised to give them credit for having a strong hand when they click raise. On the flop, it's actually a bit more erratic, but on the turn in particular, and also on the river in certain lines, it is definitely on the very strong side. We 3-bet the pocket eights against the fish, and we get this ace-6 board texture. We're gonna start off with the small bet here with the pair, because we would definitely benefit from this player folding their overcards. And now I'm gonna play a line here that I've been playing against recreational players since 2017. It's been 9 years that I've been taking this line against recreational players, which is to check the turn and call down against their bets. The thing about recreational players is that they're gonna have a lot more garbage hands than you would expect. And when you check to them on a dry board, they basically perceive that as huge weakness, and they start putting money into the pot. So here, I'm gonna call down, and I'm gonna win about 45% of the time. I'm still gonna lose 55% of the time in this situation. But given how his river bet, for example, here, his river bet is almost half pot. Against a half pot bet, I only need to win 25% of the time at showdown to break even with my call. And by studying population tendencies, you can see that by calling down here, you're gonna win 45% of the time. So I'm essentially printing money with the call, and that's gonna be enough for us to want to play this line. This time, unfortunately, he showed up with the nuts on the river, but as I said, we don't need the play to work every single time. With the pot odds we're getting, 25% on the showdown is already enough to break even, and we can expect to have about 45% equity against their betting range. What happened to my music? What is the most effective way to find good tables? Sit at tables with few players or actively wait on tables with fish? Well, how would you actively wait on tables with the fish? If the table already has a fish, there's nothing for you to wait, right? So the way to find good tables is put your name into a bunch of wait lists for tables that already have the fish, because sometimes the regular sitting there is gonna leave and you can take a seat. So put your name on wait lists out there, and well, just keep browsing the lobbies, right? There's no secret about it. Just keep browsing the lobbies and keep opening the tables, seeing who's there, and trying to pick the best seats. There's not much more you can do apart from that. And then once you're playing higher stakes, what people typically do if they want to guarantee a table with the fish, they start tables, right? So they sit at an empty table, and if a regular comes, they battle until a fish comes. At high stakes, that typically is the only way you can guarantee a good table, because the games, one could say they are predatory. And once the fish sits, everyone's gonna try to sit, and basically it becomes a competition of who clicks the button faster, or who are located closest to the poker site servers. Essentially, that's the race you have at higher stakes, and then the only way to avoid that is to actually start the tables, right? Vamos, Saulo, GL. Cara, tem uma diferença muito grande para as mesas regulares de NL2 para as mesas de Rush and Cash. Sou vencedor nas mesas regulares, mas apanho na Rush. Tem uma diferença bem grande sim, meu querido. Someone asked in Portuguese whether there is a big difference between the regular tables and the Rush and Cash tables, because they have a large win rate at regular tables, but they are struggling at Rush. And in fact, the difference can be quite dramatic. That's why I always advise whoever follows me to focus on regular tables. You guys see me playing Rush a lot here because I play to make content a lot of the time, and playing more hands per hour is something good for content creation. It allows me to play more hands. It allows me to make a more dynamic stream, a more dynamic video. But I will always recommend you guys to favor regular tables. Top right, $25 game. We flop bottom pair. The guy c-bets about 40% pot. You can definitely play some non-conventional lines here. The standard is to check call with this hand, but you can also play check raise if you think your opponent is going to fold to check raise too much, right? So getting your opponent to fold the overcards is always going to be a very favorable thing to your mediocre hands. So these hands, they might fit into the check raise range as well. My opponent double barrels and I have a pair and a gutter, so I have to make this call here. And then river, let's see what the bet size that he picks. Typically speaking here, regulars bluff more with over bet sizes rather than the 3/4 pot size. The 3/4 pot size is going to be very heavy on king jacks and ace jacks. And then they might throw in overbets with some bluffs like queen 3 or queen 5 or king 3 or king 5, right? He bets exactly that size. I think here all options are very close. Calling, folding, and even raising. I'm gonna go with the fold here. Not gonna get fancy against this player. I do think this is the least bluffed sizing. So just go ahead with the fold and move on. Jack 7 off is going to be a profitable open against someone like this who's playing super tight. He's playing 12/9 over the 58 hands he's been in this table. So that's what I talked about, how at these small limits, you're either going to have players playing too many hands or too few hands. The rare type is this guy, right, who's playing the appropriate amount of hands, 27% VPAB. A lot of times you're going to have this guy who just plays way too few hands, or you're going to have this guy who plays way too many hands. Against the tight guys, you're going to want to play very aggressively when you have the chance. That's why I'm opening this Jack 7 offsuit. I flop a middle pair with no redraw. I check call the flop. Now he overbets the turn ace. The turn ace is a card where he could actually be over bluffing with this bet. But since we don't have much information about this player other than they're pretty tight, we're going to make the fold. But it's in fact quite easy to over bluff on those connected textures. Imagine the amount of gut shots and straight draws that he has in his range. So if he's trying to put pressure, it is actually easy to over bluff. But again, we're going to use the profile as the primary source of information on how to play against this opponent. And then if you develop reads, if he shows up at showdown with some weird holdings, we might want to change our game plan against that player. At the bottom right, we're going to use the Queen 8 offsuit to 3-bet sometimes. This is part of the equilibrium strategy here, where we're going to be using a lot of these offsuit hands to 3-bet pre-flop. The 3-bet range from the big blind against the small blind should typically be a polarized range. So these offsuit hands are going to be an essential part of that range. On the flop, we flop a low board. Low paired board. We have 2 overs with backdoor flush draw. We have a very easy c-bet here, where we're gonna get him to fold a bunch of king highs and even some ace highs. Bottom left, at the $200 game, we flop trips in a multi-way pot. Stefan decided to limp under the gun. So Stefan is here at the $200 games, trying to do his thing, and he limped under the gun. This is a play that is very effective when you have a recreational player to your left, because the recreational player is going to isolate you pretty wide, and then you can do limp 3-bets against the recreational player. And since they don't fold to a 3-bet, essentially by limping your premiums, you're playing a much bigger pot than you would otherwise if you open. If you just open, the recreational player will just call, and then the blinds are going to want to call because there's a fish in the pot. So when you open a premium hand with the fish left to act, there's a high chance you're going to be playing a multi-way pot out of position post-flop. Now, if you limp, the recreational player will try to isolate you, and then you can put a 3-bet in, and then they're going to call. So you're playing a heads-up big pot against the fish, compared to a multi-way small pot against a bunch of players. So limping your premiums can actually be a very effective exploitative play against recreational players if they are on your left. But there needs to be enough stack depth for that to make sense. Here we have a fish that is only 23 big blinds deep, so I'm not sure it's super advised to do that in this occasion. Single raise pot here, we're sitting with king 9 here on this turn. We're gonna have So the way to play the situation here is to play with the very polarized range. We're gonna bet our 2 pair plus and our bluffs. We might want to bet some ace queen ace jack as well sometimes. So that's gonna be a part of the equilibrium. But the typical strategy here is going to be 2 pair plus or a bluff. On the river, we're going to bet small with our 2 pair, essentially trying to get called by an ace. And he does call with ace 7. Awesome. The bottom right with 3 bet or 7-6 against regular. We also got it through. Next hand we got queen 10 offsuit. We get called by the big blind, and here you guys are gonna see me talking about some more advanced stuff. So I'm playing against a regular at 10-20. I am concerned with the accuracy of my flop c-bet strategy. So I'm going to be using the randomizer to make sure that I'm c-betting the appropriate amount of weak hands and checking the appropriate amount of strong hands. So you see that I rolled a 14 on the RNG. What does this 14 mean? Well, basically, I'm going to be using this number to decide whether I'm going to call or whether whether I'm going to bet or I'm going to check. What I like to do with my flop c-bet strategy is I'm going to put my hands into buckets. And I use buckets multiple of 20% frequency. So basically, I'm going to be saying I'm going to be betting this hand either 20% of the time, 40% of the time, 60% of the time, or 80% of the time. I'm going to be putting my hand in one of these buckets. I'm going to decide the bucket based on the board texture, the strength of my hand, and also the suits of my hand. You can see here that I have a heart on a club, diamond, spade board texture. This is not ideal to have because if my opponent has a backdoor flush draw, he's going to be continuing very often. And if he doesn't have a backdoor flush draw, if he has a heart in his hand, he's more likely to fold. So I have a hand that decrease the probability that my opponent will fold because I'm blocking hands that he will check fold against my bet. So I'm going to be using this hand less often than, let's say, a queen of clubs, 10 of diamonds type of hand. In any case, I do have 2 overcards and a backdoor straight draw on a board texture where I have a lot of advantage on the over pairs. So I am going to be putting hands like this into a medium bucket. Typically, the 60% bucket is the go-to bucket for these types of hands. Ace queen off here against Stefan is a hand that I like to 4-bet pre-flop. It has those amazing blockers towards overpairs that make it basically a premium 4-bet bluff. So ace queen offsuit is a major hand you should be using quite a lot of the time in your 4-bets. Whether you are in position or out of position, use ace queen off to 4-bet pre-flop. At low stakes, at higher stakes, you should use it. Now, of course, you're going to use it against players who could actually be 3-betting with non-premium hands. If all your opponent has in the 3-bet range are premiums, why the hell would you 4-bet bluff? So at a micro stake game, you could in fact run into a lot of players who are not capable of 3-betting with weak hands, and in those situations, it doesn't make sense at all to 4-bet bluff with a hand like ace queen. If your opponent has proper 3-bet ranges and therefore he actually has a folding range against 4-bet, again, ace queen off is a premium 4-bet bluff candidate that is going to help you achieve a balanced range construction, because otherwise, if you just 4-bet queens plus ace king, your opponent can just always fold against your 4-bets and all of your value is going to lose realization. You're not going to extract as much money from your value hands. I decided to call this ace queen here in the $2 game because of the fish that cold called. So this adds a lot of EV to our cold call because this fish is going to be punting money post flop. And on the right here, the $25 game, we face a 3-bet from this tight regular so far. We flop a great board for a range. These middling, triple low connected boards are great for a range. The 3-better mostly has high cards in its range, hands like king jack, king queen, king 10, ace queen, ace jack. He's going to be missing this flop quite a lot of the time, which allows us to take very aggressive steps. He places a very quick check raise here, indicating that he very likely has an overpair in his hand. Now, do I want to just call here knowing that he has an overpair, or do I want to jam in his face? Honestly, it's tough to say because it depends on how he plays the turn. We can safely call here because this hand, there are a lot of turns where he's gonna be forced to check if he has an overpair. So I think calling here is fine. But if you want to just straight up jam on the turn, I don't mind that option at all. My opponent decides to check on the turn, which is fairly surprising. Honestly, I do not know what to make of his line here because I was expecting him to just jam on this card if he has an overpair, right? So either he's trying to get tricky with an overpair, or he actually had a bluff on the flop, which is surprising given that he's nap check raised. Let's see what he has. He actually had the bluff. Nice. So some people at low stakes are in fact getting more aggressive. Look at that. So this is the kind of play that you would usually only see at a higher stake, right? But here we are playing a $25 game, and the regulars are finding these types of aggressive plays. So he check raises the flop with a hand that is totally reasonable to do so in theory, but I wouldn't expect to see many micro stakes players finding these plays. But he finds the check raise, and then on a club he finds the bluff. So he found a very aggressive line here in a game where you would expect most people to be passive, right? But this shows how the games are evolving, how people are improving, and how the games are just getting tougher in general. You would not see these types of plays maybe even like 4 years ago. 4 years, 5 years ago, you would not see these kinds of plays at these limits. Might be that this player is an outlier of the population, but I do think these plays are becoming more and more common, even at low stakes. So if you're playing poker, if you're taking poker seriously at this day and age, one thing that you cannot do is neglect the studies. You must put in effort off the tables to improve your game because other people are doing exactly that. And if you don't do that yourself, you are going to be left behind. Let's try to get thin value here against our opponent, who just basically displayed no interest in the pot whatsoever. So it might be tempting to just go there and bomb into the pot because you have a full house, but you basically need to target some hand that you think you can get called by. And in that sense, I don't think a big bet is going to be good at all here. What do you think about Stefan Burakov playing 200 now? Do you think he still has the skills to compete with 1K, 2K, or is it only Bankroll issue? I have no idea. I know he has played much higher in the past, but I also know he has struggled in some nosebleed games in the past. So honestly, I have no idea. I know a lot of people look up to him and want to see him playing high stakes because they admire him. Overall, I like his style of play where he allows himself to basically say fuck GTO and play in conventional lines. So I like that style a lot. But I have no idea about his actual skill, whether he has an edge or not, or whether he beats the pool or not. I have no idea. One thing that often comes up when people discuss Stefan is how the mental part of the game is a crucial part that not a lot of people remember when they talk about skill. The mental part is also a skill. The ability to stay composed, the ability to stay focused, the ability to keep a solid execution regardless of the circumstance is a major skill in this game. It doesn't matter if you can play a bunch of fancy lines and run huge bluffs. If from time to time you tilt or you punt, you play like a monkey, essentially you're not going to have success over the long term. So a lot of people have questioned the mental stability of Stefan, to put it that way. And that's a major skill that if you lack, you're certainly going to struggle in this game. With the king queen here, we see the imposition raiser check back this king a deuce rainbow flop. Super good text for him to potentially take a stab for cheap, but he does decide to check back, and then he calls my bet on the turn. So what is he saying with this line, right? So he checks back a super dry board in position, then he calls a bet on the turn. He's saying he's got a middling hand. It could be that he's slow playing exactly pocket kings, but since pocket kings is only one combination, it's just very likely he has some kind of middling hand. Some kind of 8x, pocket 7s, or even some kind of ace high like ace jack. So at these micro limits, you will see players playing like this, extremely face up, where if they bet, they have a certain hand strength. If they check, they have a completely different hand strength. This is obviously extremely exploitable and allows an observant opponent to take advantage. And in a situation like that, if you want to exploit this player, you basically just apply max pressure when they check. When they check, it means they don't have a very strong hand, and basically just place two very large bets, and they are going to find a fold. With the king queen offsuit here, we 3-bet the same player. Now I want to decide what am I going to do with this. So this player, we just established that he's more on the face up side. So let's check and allow him to reveal the strength of his hand. He takes a little bit to bet, and then he bets a third pot. So if he is as face up as we're saying that he is, then this bet makes sense with hands like king jack, pocket jacks, or even a 10. So what we can do here to exploit that is to go for thin value with our king queen. It seems that our read was wrong because he straight up jammed, but at this point I don't think we can fold. So let's see what he has. He has ace king this time. So this time our read was not perfect because his small size was not necessarily tied to his hand strength. But in any case, king queen is a super strong hand here, so it's not like we made a serious mistake with our hand. At the bottom right in the 10-20 game, we're playing against a recreational player. Has played only 11 hands at the table so far. Let me see what the pre-flop action. We 3-bet small against him. We 3-bet small, he calls. We bet the flop, he calls. Turn we decide to check. River is an unfortunate run-out where the 5 of diamonds completes a bunch of hands for his range. But given that he's a 45 VPAP, there's no way we should fold here. We are going to make the call. He shows up with 8-7 offsuit. This would be an amazing hand for him to jam with, right? So this player definitely on the more passive side. He takes a bet sizing that does not make sense with his hand. He's trying to turn it into a bluff, but if he's going to turn this into a bluff, well, do it for a bigger size and actually put some pressure into my range, right? If he has a set, if he has two pair, if he has a flush, he's not going to be betting the size, right? So very poor sizing choice here by my opponent. And you can see how recreational players sometimes make plays that don't necessarily make much sense, and that's why we cannot be folding much against them. He jams at the very next hand. We got king 8 suited. Yeah, let's give him the gamble. Let's give him the gamble. We are going to have a decent amount of equity regardless of what he has. He shows up with ace deuce. He flops a pair. We have a flush draw. And he holds this time. Alright, my friend. You keep playing. Hey, thanks for the stream. Love your vid, says Jan Gold. Thanks so much, my friend. Hope you're finding it valuable. Is that real Stefan? Yes, it is the real Stefan. Ace 5 hand you check down against the reg. I'm not going to be able to remember that. We have 105 people watching at the moment. Appreciate anyone for tuning in on this Friday. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not yet subscribed, alright? You are going to find me streaming here a lot of the time on Thursdays and Fridays. By subscribing, you increase the chances that you're going to see my next stream. And you're going to get lots of value out of it. So you lose absolutely nothing. And it's a total free roll. So if you want to help me out, subscribe to the channel. I can see that about 30%, more than 30%, 50% of the viewers are not yet subscribed. So I would encourage you to hit that subscribe button. At the bottom left here, at the $200 game, we have a straight on the river. And we significantly decrease the chance that our opponent has a straight because we have 2 deuces in our hand. Oh, fuck. I left the table. That was a mistake. Now we're going to be able to come back now. Because there's a wait list. Well, let's put ourselves in the wait list and maybe we can get the seat back. It's just that my time bank expired and then I accidentally clicked leave table. We have here this player is playing 31/31 in 16 hands. Doesn't seem to be a fish so far. Fishes typically have a high gap between VPIP and PFR. In any case, we have a very easy C-bet on double Broadway board. Double Broadway board, amazing board for the 3-better pre-flop. So we're going to be betting very aggressively. Next, at the $200 game, we're playing against a recreational and we see an 8-4-3 rainbow texture. We can play this board in many ways. The easiest way is to use the half pot sizing with a very high amount of hands in your range. The idea here is that these disconnected low boards require a lot of floats and a lot of raises from the out of position player. And it's very likely that if your opponent is a weaker player, he's not going to find the appropriate amount of calls and raises, and that obviously just increases the value of c-betting. Checking is absolutely not a problem as well, but c-betting typically makes the hand easier to play, and it's super profitable at the same time. When the turn pairs the board, you know, if we are assuming that he's not going to raise enough, he's not going to call enough, his range is stronger than it should when he calls, then the turn pairs the board and he bombs the river. It's actually tempting to call because I don't think he bluffs an ace and he doesn't have all that much value. But because this player has 0 PFR, I'm going to fold. If he had a higher PFR, meaning that he's more capable of, you know, raising and being aggressive, I could see myself finding a call. But when he just has 0 PFR, he's just very, very passive in general. Seems like we are 4th in the wait list for the 10-20 table. So we're going to have to open a new one. And we can do some heads up battling here against the regular. Queen 2 is probably not an open, but whatever. At the $2 game, we have a 4 high flush draw. Why not find the stab here? Our hand is not going to get much worse than that, like 4 high. And on the river, we can bet once again, just to get rid of his ace highs and king highs. If he has a pair, he's never folding, so that's not an issue here. We're essentially just trying to get him to fold an ace high or a king high. $200 game, we have 2 pair with a flush draw. The board does have a straight possible, so typically when the board has a straight possible, you don't want to play super aggressive with the bet size. And the river here, we make the nut flush, although we don't have the nuts because king 10 of clubs would be the absolute nuts here. And I'm going to bet a size that I think is an intermediate option between an overbet, against which I think he overfolds, and the small size, against which I think he under raises. So if I bet small with another hand, I'm expecting my opponent to raise, and that's where a lot of my AV is going to come from when I bet small with a very strong hand. I'm expecting my opponent to raise, and that's where my money is going to come from. But most people are not going to raise enough when the board runs 4 to a straight. But then if I overbet with a hand as strong as this on a board that has so few possible bluffs, then he might significantly overfold. So I just basically bet an intermediate size where he's gonna call a 10, he might call 2 pairs. It's a compromise that we make there. We split up with king high here, the heads up 10-20 table. We've got ace 6 suited. I'm gonna call the open here. So this is something that you might be forced to do when you're playing higher stakes, where you have to reg battle to secure your spot at the table. Let's try a different line here against the fish at the $200 game. We're gonna check back with a king queen. And once he checks very quickly, we're gonna try a sequence of small size into big size as a bluff. Essentially, we're making his range wide on the turn, only so we can bomb into him on the river and force him to fold. It's nice that the river completes the flush because it's going to be a scarier card for him. So now we bomb, basically trying to get him to fold all of his 1 pair hands. In this case, he does call with the ace 3. So this player is demonstrating that he is willing to call. So what you can do is tag the player, take notes. Once he displayed a behavior that you would not expect, essentially if you would expect a different behavior from him, it is worth tagging, it is worth taking a note so that you can adjust your own strategy going forward. So I would definitely expect a typical recreational player to fold the ace 3 there. Once he calls with that, I know that I need to adjust my strategy a little bit against him. We've got king 7 of spades on the 10-20 table against the regular. This is a board texture in which we can in fact be aggressive with c-bets because we're going to be stronger than our opponent. However, king high hands do not benefit too much from c-betting. So even though we can c-bet a decent amount of our range, king highs can still benefit a lot from the check. It's not a board texture that he is capable of probing too much on, which means that our check does have a lot of realization, because he's gonna be probing only like 25% of the time. So 75% of the time, we're gonna face another check and we're going to be able to see the river. That's what happens here. We pick up a flush draw, but still We don't need to start turning this hand into a bluff. And on the river, if he bets, we actually have the decision between calling and folding. Raising, not much of an option, I would say, with a hand like this. Or is it? I was going to say it isn't much of an option with raising, but it actually might as well be. Because we do get here with some 2 pairs. But we don't get here with too many 5s. That's the problem. He takes the small stab here, and we are beating all of the bluffs that he takes with this line. Of course, he can be betting quite thin for value with any 1-pair hand trying to get called by a king high. But at the same time, it's not difficult to overbluff a line like this. So I'm going to exploitatively overcall here with my king highs. So as you can see, he shows up with the jack 6. If he's not careful controlling his frequencies, he is going to be overbluffing a line like this where he has a ton, right? A ton of queen highs and jack highs and 10 highs and whatever. So when I have a king high that beats all of his bluffs, I do think that we should be making the call. We don't need this heads up table anymore because we got our seat back at the table that we're playing. We have a big whale here. The problem is that he is short stacked, but hopefully he can double up off some other regular here so we can play some pots against them. A7, we're playing a limped pot, it seems here. Let's try and get some value out of our 7x. Pocket 2s. We do have that fish in the small blind, and if we flop a set against a fish, that's definitely going to be very valuable. So why not open that, which is generally a marginal hand, especially if you have what I have here, aggressive players left who are going to be 3-betting a lot. But I think the added EV of the fish should compensate for that. Faced with the 3-bet, these low pockets are actually preferable to call compared to the medium pockets like 8s, 7s. So we're going to make the call here. And against half pot on Jack 6-4, unfortunately we have to fold. So far we saw a few of the differences between these stakes. A lot more exploitation, a lot more opportunities for exploitation at the lower stakes, whereas at higher stakes, a lot of times just playing against good opponents, we must play a very solid strategy. We turn top pair here against the fish 47 VPIP fish. We're going to make the call, and we're going to call any river. And on the top right in the 25-0 game, we have a board texture that I like to play with a 3/4 flop c-bet size. Some players like to play this board as a small size board. I like to play it as a bigger size board. This player is playing 21/18/6, so he's basically someone who is treating poker seriously. He's at least trying to play the appropriate amount of hands. On the turn here, we can either bet or check. We obviously have a strong hand, but we're still dominated by a lot of flushes, so checking wouldn't be a huge problem. Easy Poker falou, salve Saulão, já tá na hora de encerrar o grind, curtindo um futebolzinho. A Celeste joga mais tarde, né, 9h30. Que outro jogo que tá rolando aí? Tá rolando algum jogo bom aí? Um jogo ruim aí nessa Copa, né, então... Dá vontade de assistir Bósnia e Herzegovina contra Curaçao, né? Tá rolando ali um Estados Unidos contra a Austrália. Ok. Mas nada mais que isso, né? Então, eu prefiro um pokerzinho do que Estados Unidos versus Austrália. So this was a multi-way pot. Flop, bet, call. Turn, check, check. River, check. Very tight player. I'm not sure I can get value on the river here. Oh my god. Look at what happens at a $25 game. At a $25 game, you will see players simply cold calling a cutoff open. Simply cold calling a cutoff open with pocket queens. That's insane, right? That's insane, but that's what happens at a $25 game sometimes. Here at the 10-20 game, we're playing against someone whom I have tagged as a good regular, which means that I'm going to be trying to play a very solid strategy. On the turn, we cannot barrel all of our gut shots, and on the river, we can definitely bluff, but not all the time here. Basically, we're trying to get him to fold ace highs, maybe some queen high floats that he has in his range, and we can be value betting any king, any 10, essentially even some pocket 8s, pocket 9s type hands could fit into this bet size. We 3-bet the pocket kings here, and we face a lead from our opponent. Nothing wrong with this lead. I do think, however, that we should raise here. He does not re-raise. In fact, he very quickly calls. That's fairly interesting. I think we're gonna bet. So what happened here? He donk called, right? He donk called the flop, check called the turn. Now The river is an ace. Yeah, I don't think he calls us with worse if we jam. So I guess check is the way to go here. Yeah, so I don't think he's the type of player who's gonna call jacks here if we jam. So we have to let it go. Gonna take a break real quick. Get some water that I am thirsty from speaking so much. And then we can get back. So far so good. We've made a stack at 1020. We've made 2 stacks at the $25 game. We've made 2 stacks in the $2 game. Only the $200 game we're not so lucky so far. You look solid, great stream. Could you please explain why the small pocket pairs are better calling hand against 3-bet than the medium ones? So the thing is, it's essentially an implied odds thing where in the board textures where you hit a set with the lower pocket pairs, you're going to get a lot of value from your opponent's overpairs, right? So imagine you flop a set with pocket 2s or pocket 3s. One of those cards is guaranteed to be a very low card, which contributes to the board being more disconnected. And on more disconnected boards, the overpairs are going to stack off, right? But the medium pocket pairs like the 8s, 9s, 7s, 6s, a lot of times you can make a set on boards that the board is more connected. And therefore, you're not going to get all the money against the overpairs. And sometimes you might even lose against some straight combination that the IPU player can have. Right? So it's essentially one of the answers for it. I don't think it's the entire answer, but one of the answers for it is that it has higher implied odds from basically whenever you hit, the chance that your opponent is going to stack off is higher than on a more connected middling board. So that's one thing. And also those hands, they have better blocker effects in terms of being a good bluff candidate. So your opponent is going to have some middling hands in their ranges. And then sometimes when you want to use a pocket as a bluff, you want to unblock foes, right? And those very low pockets, your opponent never has low hands in his range. So they also have more fold equity as a bluff when you want to use them as a bluff, right? But it's mostly the implied odds thing. So they are a little bit better than 7s, 8s, 9s type hands. Alright, I'll be right back so we can continue taking a look at how $2 game changes from a $2,000 game. No one wants to take the seat. I'll take it. Turn the blinds into money here so we can see the difference in stakes. Robert Stevens opens up the button to $50, 2.5 blinds. Small blind 3 bets, easy fold here. We have a player here playing 92 VPAP. This is one thing you're gonna see way more often at a $2 game than at a $2,000 game. A player willing to VPAP 92% of hands. He's also posting straddles every hand. It's just clicking buttons, not caring about anything whatsoever. We still have that player with 49 VPAP here in the 200 and out game. The $25 game has one recreational here to our left, but he's very, very short stacked, only 14 big blinds. Not ideal, right? You want to have the recreational player with more money to lose. King Queen offsuit here, obviously it's a very strong hand when someone is playing any 2 cards. So let's call him in position. And on the bottom left here we have a limp, then get raised to $5, makes no sense, probably a misclick. Let's make the call and see a flop here with our 10-eye offsuit. A6 on the bottom right is very close between call, fold, and even 3-bet. I'm gonna go with the fold. Our opponent bets 2 cents into a 24-cent pot. And of course, the gambler wants to raise. You got this one, my friend. We have a player here who really likes to 3-bet, it seems. Or maybe no, maybe that's my impression, but I did see him 3-bet a couple of times. So let's keep an eye on him. Great content, great music choice, thank you. My pleasure, my friend. I'm glad to know you're enjoying it. That's my goal here with the streams. To have something that is at the same time entertaining and high value in terms of strategy so you guys can improve your poker games. My motto here in my channel has always been to make poker strategy simple so that you can make more money. So I hope I can achieve that with today's stream. We've got pocket fives here, cut off against small blind. We face a 3-bet from regular. We're gonna make the call here and see a flop. As I said, these low pockets, they play well against the 3-bet range. And the bet size was also not very big. Flop is Jack 8 deuce rainbow, and he goes with the half pot. I believe my hand is going to be indifferent between calling and folding against this bet size on this texture. So at a 10-20 game against a good player, I'm going to again be trying to play very solid. So I'm going to run the RNG here to decide if I want to continue calling or not. And the RNG has rolled 88. 88 for me is going to be a fold. So the way I use the RNG is low numbers are going to be the more aggressive action, and the high numbers are going to be the most passive action. My particular hand, which is pocket fives, I know that it only mixes between call and fold. I'm not going to raise with this hand. Therefore, the most aggressive action is call, the most passive is fold. And I think a 50-50 split there is probably a good way to start. So I would call if the RNG was 50 or below, and then I'm going to fold if the RNG is above 50. Alright, so that's how to use a random number generator to achieve a solid execution. Try to have a close to balanced execution against a strong player in a limit where we're going to be facing a lot of these players. Recreational player here playing quite active on our right. Queen 10 here, if this player was more passive, let's say if he was a weaker regular, I would VPIP this Queen 10 offsuit here. With the strong regular that can squeeze a lot here in the big blind, I think we must fold. Six deuce is an easy fold, nothing we can do. This player here keeps straddling. That's super funny. So essentially, a guy he's putting 4 blinds with any 2 cards in every single hand. You don't need to do much to make money out of someone doing this. Whenever you have a semi-decent hand you got into the pot, the guy's gonna have any 2 cards, you're gonna be pushing equity. You just play your hand, right? So the guy's constantly putting money compulsorily with any 2 cards, you just let him do so. And focus on just getting your money when the cards are half decent. Queen 9 offsuit is almost there. Queen 10 offsuit would surely be a VPIP here. Queen 9 offsuit is close. Because we have, 2 tight players to our left, we can probably play this profitably by calling in position. We're not going to get squeezed much when these players are tight. And again, this guy has any 2 cards. Once he straddles here, of course, he might raise some hands, but given the way he's playing, we're just going to get post-flop against a super weak range. We flop the middle pair, he bets the minimum. We still have to be concerned with this player at left act. So typically here, calling would be the normal. But this is a little bit face up, right? So the super whale bets 1 blind and you just call in position. That's a little bit too face up, and therefore I think just raising with the hand that is obviously pushing equity against him is fine. Of course, you're going to be out of value betting yourself a little bit against your opponent when he has a jack. But I think that's a small enough price to pay. On the bottom right, we have the pocket kings against the recreational player. We 3-bet and get this jack 6-3 board texture. Pretty good board texture for pocket kings. We can continue here with the flop c-bet. We get snap called by our opponent on the turn. I'm sorry, on the flop. Turn is a innocuous 7 of diamonds. Because he snap called the flop, I'm gonna charge him a little bit more than I would normally. And I'm gonna be leaving a small amount behind. But that's no problem because we're focusing on maximizing the EV right here on the turn. And if he has some kind of equity, the way recreational players typically play, he might just straight up jam the turn. That's not how he did this time, unfortunately. But it's okay. With the pocket kings here in the $200 game, I'm going to isolate very, very big here. You guys can see, let me put in blinds for you to see it better. He limps here, and I'm going to isolate to 6 big blinds. That's the size I recommend you guys use. We have made quite a lot of research over at Metagame, my stable, so that we could figure out what's the best ISO size here to take against fish. And generally, this is going to be the go-to size to isolate against a limping fish, right? You want to really charge them, understanding that this is how you're going to make the most money against their super wide limp calling ranges. $25 game, we have Queen Jack offsuit. This table very, very tight here, except for this player on our right. So we have here 4 regulars and 1 fish. That's how you should be thinking about the game, dividing players in regulars and fish. So we have 1 fish here and 4 regulars. Same thing here in the 10-20 game. We have 4 regulars and 1 fish directly to our right. We flop flush draw with the gut shot and overcard. So we have a very strong hand here equity wise. He c-bets half pot. We're gonna call. Raising would also be okay, but when recreational players bet in these low boards, on these low boards, they're not gonna fold much to raise. So you can realize equity for cheap by just calling. Turn is also close between betting and checking. I'm gonna go with the check here and bluff the river if I have the chance. He pots the river, and this is the second time I've seen him potting. Jack 10, is it a good enough value bet here? Might be. Let's go exploitatively for a small size here, just to get him to call any pair. And here, typically pot sizes are strong, but this player, you know, he's using it more often than it's reasonable for him to actually have strong hands all the time, right? So we keep an eye on the guy, and we keep notes, like if in the next hand he pots again, the chances that he's only doing it with a very strong hand are very small. Because how often is he going to have a very strong hand 3 times in a row over a small sample of hands? It's very unlikely, right? And it's just way more likely that he's just spamming that pot size button. So we just keep an eye on the guy so that we can update our beliefs about the player. Alright, so we start with an initial belief that, okay, pot size are typically strong. And then the guy keeps spamming the pot size button every time he gets post flop. Well, then there's no way anymore that he's just using it with a very strong hand. So pay attention to table dynamics, taking notes of showdowns, all of that is extremely important in a game where details matter a lot and edges lie in the details. Of course, if you're playing against a guy like this, you don't need many details to make money off of him, right? He's just spewing money left and right. However, against normal players, you are going to want to pay a lot of attention to detail to extract the highest amount of edge. We have King 10 suited here, which we're certainly going to VPIP now. If he raises, we're going to 3-bet. If he folds, we're going to raise. We open, get a fold, ace queen off here, BVB against Mr. Stefan Burakov. They are chatting a lot here, the Russian players. Stefan is doing his speech. Talking about God and donating. The guy's definitely the character, right? He's definitely a character. Jack 7 deuce, rainbow texture. We can go a bunch of ways here. I like to use half pot here on these boards. My queen 9 is a hand that can barrel in a number of turns. This is not one of the great ones. I think an overcard turn is amazing. A 10 would be great just because of the equity. On a blank, we can check back and then hope to catch up, or sometimes bluff raise them if they use a mediocre bet sizing. He pots on a 9. I'm going to make the call here, although I will lose a lot of time. But I think against a play like this, who seems very volatile, 50% VPIP, we should make a small profit with this call. Next hand, we got Queen Jack offsuit. We're going to open that for sure. And we got pocket kings. So our time has come to take some money out of the whale. So let's go with 4x. 4x out of position is pretty reasonable. He snap makes the call, which means we should have probably gone bigger. And given this guy is a 97 VPIP guy, he basically wants to gamble, right? So when we have a strong hand, we're just going to pile money into the pot, okay? Essentially, if he has a piece, he's not going to fold. So let's go for it here. What do you have, my friend? Ah. The one time it's our time, he shows up with 2 pair. Amazing. Well, we still have equity here. We have 18% equity now. We're just hoping that the board will pair. So we're rooting for a jack, a king, or a 3. Not a jack, not a king, not a 3. He's gonna take it. How good is this game? Huh? The guy plays 100% of hands. He gets into a massive 3-bet pot. He flops 2 pair. That's why people, when they play online poker, they say it's rigged, right? I understand you guys. I understand you guys when they say it's rigged. Pocket 4s here. We can we 3-bet? It's close between 3-bet and call here. We can bet small here on the flop. Check would also be fine. And on the bottom right, we've got ace queen against the fish. With 3-bet 7.5 blinds. Flop is king jack 3. 2 diamonds. We have that ace queen. Very, very good hand to c-bet on this board. We're going to get a lot of folds. Well, not a lot because we're going to bet small, but we're going to get 30 to 40% of folds on this board. Check raises to a tiny size. I don't like to see the check raise, but the size is small enough that we can call and see a turn. We're getting like 4 to 1. Jack of diamonds is interesting. We pick up equity and it reduces the chance that he has a hand like king jack or pocket jacks. So I'm actually going to put him to the test. Let's see if he can call a bear king. Nope. Nice. This one goes our way. Not a huge pot, but 30 big blind pot cannot be neglected. King queen offsuit. This would be a hand very close between squeezing, calling, and folding. Because we have the fish here, I think calling is okay. But it's very close between all options. If you want to fold, if you want to squeeze, I wouldn't blame you. Let's play the 3-bet here with the king queen in the $2 game against the whale. He keeps straddling with any 2 cards. King queen offsuit is definitely a decent hand to play against him. We get a 3-bet by an 18 VPIP nit. The whale jams. Oh my god. He's having a great time. He is having a great time. Ace jack suited. Wonder if he flops a jack. No jack, just an ace. Alright. Wish we had one of those here at the 10-20 game. We have a 39/24 player here who has been driving the action. But we haven't run all that well so far at this table here. Seven deuce suited. We call against min raise. He pots the flop. Fold and move on. A lot of players have the curiosity to know what are the differences between a low stake game and a high stake game. What is it that high stakes players are doing that low stakes players are not doing? Well, there are a lot of stuff. But one thing you guys should keep in mind is that it is the exact same game. So there is an overlap between what a low stakes player does and what a high stakes player does. There are a lot of spots where both are going to be playing exactly the same way. The game is the same, right? But there are also going to be lots of differences that compound over time and compound over the game tree. I was talking about this yesterday in yesterday's stream. We had a yesterday stream talking about every reason why you're stuck at low stakes. And I was talking about how the difference between a mediocre player and a very good player is that the very good player basically does everything a little bit better. In poker, what you do to improve is you improve a lot of things a little bit over time. And all those little things, when you look at them in isolation, they seem like very, very small, and in isolation, it doesn't seem like they mean anything. But when you sum up all of those differences and those differences compound, you actually see a huge difference in the actual profitability and the win rate and the skill of the given player, right? And that's what you guys are going to be able to observe as you move up in stakes. It's not like a 25 NL player is 10 times better than a 2 NL player. You're going to see both of them playing a lot of spots exactly the same way. The 25 NL player already has a better sense of the pre-flop ranges, already has a better sense of which hands he can stack up, which hands he cannot. So he's going to be making a few less mistakes across pretty much every single spot. And once you jump to 1-2 game, a $200 game, exactly the same thing happens. You don't see any secrets being played at the table. You don't see any secret play that only these guys play and no one else play below them. But you do see a lot less mistakes, a lot less small mistakes not being made anymore across the game tree. So when you're studying, you should take that into account. A lot of people hunt for hacks or secrets. So what is the secret? What is the hack that they're doing that allows them to make money? What is a hack that I could incorporate to my strategy to make money like these guys do? Don't focus on the hacks, focus on improving your understanding of the game over time. Once you improve your understanding of the game over time, you stop making a lot of small mistakes that you were making before. And with time, the more you improve it, even if a little bit, all of these small things, they compound and they generate. You're gonna become a much different player, right? So don't focus on hacks, don't focus on shortcuts. Focus on improving your understanding of the game and be patient. Allow yourself the time to actually improve. A lot of times when we're playing lower stakes, we want to get better fast. We want to, get to that point where we're printing money. But this game is a game that you don't learn it very, very fast. The rules are easy to learn. But in order to get good, you need to give it time, you need to play a ton, and you need to study off the tables. We have ace 4 here in this pot with the whale. Another guy is in here. The guy's betting 1 blind. We have the 4. Why not try and see a river? We're not going to try to run bluffs against this guy. Clearly, he does not care about the few bucks that he is gambling here. So we're just basically going to play very linearly. If we have some equity, we put money. If we don't need to care about it. So essentially we're going to be playing very face up, and that's enough to get a lot of money out of someone who just plays 100% of hands, right? And we were very close to getting all of his money, but he ended up flopping 2 pair against us in that 3-bet pot. Knight3400 says, "Hey Sala and chat, what's up my friend? How are you doing? Welcome to the stream." O Otávio deu risada da GG Poker. GG Poker é isso aí, meu amigo. GG Poker. Às vezes você se pergunta, meu. É sério isso aí? Tá certo isso aí? Pode isso, Arnaldo? GG Poker traz essas perguntas. And even then there's live, and you realize that even bad players at 2 and out are pretty good compared to live players at 1-2 and 2-5. That's what I heard, but I haven't actually played any of those low stake live games. So the only way it can be, well, there are a few ways that it can be even better. So basically you have more players like this, right? So at any given table it might be that you have maybe 3 or 4 players that are playing 40-50% of hands, right? If that's the case, then it is going to absolutely be a super easy game. And then, I've heard that some people that don't even know the rules when they're playing these low stakes casino games. So it might be that you want to... It might be that you make money just off of players that don't even know the rules. Our friend here decided to triple barrel. He decided to triple barrel on Jack Jack X King 9. It's very tempting to bluff raise here against a fish small bet on the river. These small bets, as I said, fishes have the obvious bet sizing tail that you would expect. And I like to bluff raise against their small bets a lot, but 6-5 off spades is just a terrible hand to do it with. If I had any other hand that was not as bad as this, I think this would be a good spot to bluff raise. There was also the problem that he's short stacked, so there was only 18 blinds left, so it might be that he doesn't find a fold with some marginal hands. But overall, attacking small bets from fishes is definitely a good proposition. Our friend Gems here, we're gonna call pocket tens, why not? This time, of course, he has pocket jacks. Let's see if we can hit something here. Backdoor flush draw, no. We are gonna lose again to the 100 VPIP whale. I love this game. I love this game. Well, he had a bigger stack before, so he has lost a few pots, just not to me. He has lost to Break You Nuts and to Kata, not to me though. We have 92 people watching so far. Appreciate you guys. And I'm gonna ask once again, if you're not yet subscribed, it might be that this is the first time you have seen my channel. If that's the case, my name is Saulo Costa. I've been a professional poker player since 2016. Well, actually since 2017, because 2016 I was just a micro stakes fish. But in August 2017, I left my parents' home and started supporting myself and my wife with only my poker income. So that's when I considered that I became a professional. So that was 9 years ago. Since then, I've played millions of hands online, and I have built the largest cash game stable in the world called Metagame. At Metagame, we help cash game players make more money by providing coaching in exchange for profits. This is a very common business model in the poker world, where if you're struggling or if you want to move up in stakes faster, you reach out to people that have done exactly what you want to do, and you enter what we call a staking agreement, where we provide funds for you to play, and we also provide all the coaching and technical support. In exchange for all of that, the coaching, the funds, the support, we take a cut of your profits as form of payment. Right? So typically that's a 50-50 agreement, but it can be more or less depending on your experience in the game. Metagame was founded in 2019. This year we completed 7 years of history. We're founded in March 2019. And since then, our players have won a combined amount of over $10 million. We're actually approaching already 11 million. I'm pretty sure that if we're not super close, we have already surpassed that mark. So we're talking $11 million in 7 years. And we just started 2019 with 2 players. So very, very proud of that history. I have coached for a long time inside Metagame, and nowadays I mostly focus on helping the company grow from a strategical perspective, because we have a large roster of coaches that can help you improve, many of which are playing these games here on GG Poker, including these 10-20 games here, high stakes, playing high stakes on other sites. So if you're serious about improving in poker, if you really want to give poker a shot, if you're interested in making serious side income with poker, or even want to become a pro, or if you are already a professional and you want to increase your earnings, you're tired of stagnating, then go to cash.metagame.poker and submit your application on our website. We're looking forward to working with you if you are dedicated, if you're someone who really wants to be one of the best and make money in this game, then we definitely want to work with you. Send your application at cash.metagame.poker. Also, you can type here in the chat the command !CFP, and it's going to give you the link for you to click and to go to our website. Last few orbits have been quiet, not many good hands, and this is poker. Poker is a game of patience. What is it that most bad players lack? They lack the patience. They are a little bit anxious, they play hands they shouldn't play, and then when they do play, they want to win every pot. That's not how poker works, right? If you are playing a solid game, you're going to be playing about 25% of hands, maybe a bit more depending on the exact format that you play. Maybe if you play MTTs, you can play a bit higher VPAP, because at MTTs there's no rake, so there's no rake. at the table, right? You pay rake to register for the tournament, but at the table, the dealer is not going to take any rake from the pot, so you actually get to expand your defense ranges. So from the big blind MTTs, you defend a lot. So in MTTs, you can have a bit higher VPAP, but overall, it's not going to be so much different. Something between 25 to 30% VPAP. And other players who are not patient enough, they're going to be playing a lot of hands, and this is not going to be a profitable proposition. And once you get post flop, of course, you're going to try and play your best, but a lot of times there's nothing you can do. You're going to have to give up the pot and move on to the next hand. So players at higher stakes have already understood that, and they're not going to be trying and forcing anything, right? Whereas players at low stakes a lot of times might be trying to force things to happen. I can remember in my story when I was a low stakes player, I could see myself in a lot of sessions trying to force things to happen. I was anxious for results. I was really trying to make poker work. I could not stand the idea that I was not beating the game. So a lot of times I would go into my sessions with that anxiety in the back of my mind, and that would cause me to force plays that make no sense because I wanted to force results to happen. If you're serious about making poker work, you cannot play under this mindset. You have to understand that all you gotta focus on is on making good decisions. This is what's going to bring results for you. This is what's going to make your graph go up and your balance to increase. You need to focus on making good decisions, not on trying to force pots, not on trying to force anything to happen. Just focus on doing the best that you can at that given moment with the information that you have. This is extremely important, and that's a big difference between low stakes and high stakes players. High stakes players do this for a living. They have been doing this for a living for a long time. So they understand that the game contains a lot of variance, and all they can do, all they can control is how well they play any given hand. Okay, this is a very, very important mindset skill that you need to nurture if you want to get really good at this game. Stefan stacking off against his fellow Russian friend. Aces against kings. Pretty standard cooler. A galera falando lá do fichão ali, realmente o cara tá me rapelando aqui. Let's flat this queen 9 suited here on the button. Super nice looking hand. What split is metagame doing on CFP only if no staking? That depends on your level, my friend. So the deals are according to your level. If you come here as a super solid established mid-stakes player who's printing 70k, 8k a year, you're gonna get one deal. If you get here as a struggling 25, 50 NL player, you're gonna get a very different deal, right? So there's no typical thing. It's all about your current level, and also what exactly is your goal, right? There is some flexibility as well in the deal to, for example, how much close support do you want? There are some players who come to us mostly looking for the stake, and there are some players who really want and need the coaching. So a lot of these things are going to have an impact into what is going to be a good deal for the both parties. At the end of the day, we're trying to make a deal that is profitable for you and profitable for us, right? So that's the goal when assigning someone for the CFP. We want the contract to be profitable for you and of course for us, right? No one likes to lose money. But it has to be a win-win situation. When we cannot find a way to make it win-win, then we have to give it up. But I would say that most of the time there is an angle where it is a win-win proposition for the both parties. $870 here at the $25 game. we stab. He dunks the river. He dunks on the king. So third, yeah, seems to be a fish, but has played few hands here at the table so far. Let's raise to a size that a fish would call a king. He folds. Assuming that's an option. And yeah, it is an option, okay? We offer both CFP and staking contracts. Historically, we have observed that Europeans typically prefer a no staking agreement, only coach in exchange for profits. For some reason, Europeans, it's probably a cultural thing, but they prefer to play with their own bankroll. I should probably ask this to people inside here. We have about 25% of our contracts from people outside Brazil. So if you don't know, well, probably you realize from my flag here, I am from Brazil and my company is in Brazil. And 75% of our players are Brazilian, but we have 25% of players from outside Brazil, and most of those are from Europe. And a big percentage of the European contracts are CFP. So they come already with some bankroll. They already have built a bankroll for themselves, at least for the stakes that they play. And then they want to play with their own money. Oftentimes, we try to revert that. We try to show to the player that it's actually more profitable to play under staking. Because the problem with playing with CFP is that when you're playing with your own bankroll, you have to make cash outs all the time. And of course, you have to build that bankroll to move up in stakes. So let's say you play this $1-2 game, the 200 NL game. If you want to move up to 50 NL, to 500 NL, you need 2.5 times the bankroll, right? Let's say you have $20,000 bankroll to play 200 NL. You need a $50,000 bankroll to play 500 NL. And it's gonna take some time for you to build that, right? So typically a staking agreement is going to be more profitable for both parties, not just for us, especially for you, because we're gonna be able to move you up without having to wait for your bankroll to be built, right? We have the bankroll, we provide the funds, so if we understand that you're technically ready for the next level, we can put you up there immediately, right? So in general, staking is more profitable than CFP, and therefore if you're getting into the deal, you want to move up in stakes, make more money, you should be choosing the staking agreement. But I understand that for some cultural reasons, some people prefer to play with their own money. They feel like it's too much responsibility to play stake. They want to get into makeup and all that stuff. They want to have, perhaps they want to have more control over which sites and the stakes they play. That also is part of the dynamics, right? So when you play with our own money, we obviously get a higher control over which sites you're going to play, which stakes you're going to play. Not that we don't listen to the player, of course, we're always doing something that makes sense for both parties. But when you're playing with your own money, it's very hard for me to get up to you and say, hey, you should play on this side or that limit. It's you who are taking all the risk, right? So there is that as well. But if we're taking it from a financial perspective, staking should definitely be higher EV overall. Let's turn our 10-9-12 bluff here. We block the typical hands that this opponent would be checking back and then calling a turn bet with. So hands like 10s and 9s. Out of nowhere, he decides to raise. Let's get fancy here and 3-bet him on the turn. This might be one of the... yeah, it's probably one of the smart asses that are trying to get tricky just because they are on stream. Because this line makes no sense, right? He checks back the flop and then raises small against my turn bet. Like, what is he trying to do? It just makes no sense. On the bottom left, we decide to c-bet the flop with our ace-9 against Stefan. On this double Broadway ace-x board, we're gonna use a big size. Our hand is not strong enough to go for a triple barrel, so totally fine to check back on a blink. And against a half pot size, we just close our eyes and call. Pocket tens is a fold against under the gun 4-bet. And ace jack in the bottom right, in a 4-bet pot, we're definitely going to be folding this flop. This is a flop where he can play half putter check with his range. And it seems like he's doing so because he did find the check. A lot of people are just going to range bet. But if he's not going to range bet, it probably means he's using a bigger size. And then what's his checking range here? A bunch of random broadways and then some aces for balance. That's how typically you're going to construct your checking range. You may want to sprinkle in some pocket kings with the king of spades sometimes as well. But typically the hand that is used to balance a flop checking range at a low SPR is going to be pocket ace. That's how a good player at high stakes is going to be constructing his range. My ace jack here can either bet or check the turn. Both are fine here. But since this is a flush completing card and my opponent has checked twice, his range is somewhat polarized here. So it's not like I get all that much value with my ace jack. The river is an ace, so I make 2 pair here, and this could be a card where he hits ace king and ace queen. It is perfectly reasonable for him to be playing ace king and ace queen this way. And when he bets here, we have a fairly easy jam. Let's hope for ace king with the king of spades so that we can double up. Our bluffs here would be hands like, I think king jack would be a reasonable hand for us that we would get here with. Although I'm not sure if I would call that pre-flop all that often. And maybe a pocket with a spade. Maybe a hand like pocket tens with a spade. Yeah, I think pocket tens with the spade is reasonable. Maybe even pocket queens with the spade. Yeah, pocket queens with the spade, maybe. He did not like our jam. What can I do, my friend? I've got 2 pair. I have to go for it. Right now you can see the banner there for metagame type exclamation CFP in the chat if you want to learn more about it. Go to our website, you can see testimonials of some of our players. You can see a little bit of our structure inside. So once you get in, what exactly do you get, right? So who are you getting coached by? What are the perks of becoming a metagame player? And in general, a bunch of information about the company, the program, who are the founders, all of that stuff you can check directly on our website. Just type exclamation CFP in the chat. I don't have any patience and always lose to the nuts. My friend, you're not alone there. You are not alone. Ace first suited here against cutoff 3-bet. It's close between call, fold, and 4-bet. And we have pocket aces in the bottom right. Nice. Gonna go with the call here with the ace first suited. Although if we want to do, as I said, fold or 4-bet, all of them are very close options. Pocket aces on a triple low board, fairly easy call. Ace 4 on a low paired board functions very well as a stab. Checking is not a mistake, but betting small to get him to fold all his broadways is also going to be good. And of course, we have a bunch of outs to improve if he has any pair. Turn double paired board. Technically, we could still bet, to be honest. I don't think it would be a huge issue. And on the river here, we split against his ace highs. So I think the standard here is to just check. This pocket aces here is kind of on a thinner side of the check raise here. I think in theory I should just check call with this hand. But it could be that my opponent perceives my range as overly weak from checking the river. And he may want to play some thinner value bets with the 6 or some kind of pocket pair. So I like to get a little bit on the thinner side here. He ends up folding. We have a Fen here. The bottom right, we have a hand that can c-bet sometimes, but the RNG at 84, I think we can check. So I would play a 3/4 pot c-bet strategy on this board. Basically, it's a board that has so many draws and connectivity that you don't want to bet small and just allow the draws to realize their equity. And the trash are trash. Like if he has 8-7 of clubs, you know, there's no fear of those hands. So basically, we just size up to charge and deny equity to some of those straight draws. The king is obviously amazing for us, but not much of a reason to bet ace-9 in particular. And on the river now, if he bets, we're going to have a decision. Our friend here wants to go for the gamble again. Let's go, my friend. And it's a flip. The classic ace-king against jacks. Can we win this one? Okay, the flop. Flop gave us 83% equity. Are we going to win one time against this guy? 95% equity. Okay, we did win this time. Finally. Finally. Finally, we win one against the Invincible. The Invincible. If I did from $100 to $30,000, am I a good player on cash? What kind of question is that? What kind of question is that, my friend? Just doesn't make sense. Interesting. You're gonna 3-bet any 2 cards, huh? Let's see a flop. We have a suited hand. Why not? Ooh, and now things are gonna get tricky. Yeah, now I regret calling because it seems like he only plays aggressive when he has it. Alright, my friend. Well, we were flipping. We were flipping on that one. The guy's having the time of his life. I forgot to mention, it did took me 2 years because I have a job. Yeah, I mean, the measure of being good at this game is making money, right? So if you build the bankroll from $100 to $30,000, right? That's a very nice achievement. Ace Queen off against Robert Stevens. We're gonna 4-bet sometimes. RNG at 21. I think it's good enough to go for it. He snap folds, nice. Look at how important to have the Ace Queen off in your 4-bet range. So these players are high-level players who are obviously capable of 3-betting with weak hands. And then you gotta fight back 4-betting with weak hands, and Ace Queen off is the perfect hand to use in your 4-bet range. Of course, if your opponent doesn't just have premiums in his 3-bet range. 5-4 suited here. We call a 3-bet against our Fen Camochito here. Checks back, and we see the King of Clubs on the turn. It's an interesting spot. We can bet or check with his hand. The King is obviously great for him, but he might still... honestly, this board is so dry that I think when he checks back this board here, might have some clear give ups, like let's say I don't know, like Ace 9 of hearts, you know. But most of the time it's just gonna have a hand that is not gonna fold to a bet, some kind of ace high, and of course it's gonna hit the king very often. He reopens for an overbet size. Against his size we cannot continue, but I was planning to check raise his hand against a medium normal size. Unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity. this was the last hour bit of today's stream. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you have learned something new, the differences here between micro stakes and high stakes. We were able to run pretty well here at the 10-20. We made a couple stacks, so this was likely a very profitable session for us. But I hope that you guys saw all of the differences, how you should approach one game, how you should approach the other. Overall here, just going a lot more for the attack in these pools and a lot more for a solid strategy in the tougher pool, but always with the focus of getting the most money out of the recreational player, which in the end is the player that makes this game exist or sustains this game, right? No game is going to be sustained if there are no recreationals. So here we have one recreation at every table, and that's how it should be. Next week we have more streams. Next Tuesday I'm gonna be live here, very likely in the afternoon time. So if you want to check me out playing some more next week, tune in my channel Tuesday about 2 p.m. my time here in Brazil. We're gonna be live for more action. I play on and off poker for years and never beat micros. I know a lot but lose stacks where I know I should fold. How to get a better mindset. Unfortunately, I'm no psychologist and I can't help you much in that regard, my friend. I mostly focus on giving people more technical knowledge. If you already have the technical knowledge but can't really put into practice, the only thing I can suggest is to seek therapy, where you should be able to understand why you cannot control your impulses, why you cannot be more mentally stable in this game, right? But you're not alone there. There are a lot of people with this problem that are sabotaging the results just with poor execution, even though they know they should play differently. And unfortunately, I'm not the person to help there. But I have seen some people that have seek therapy for that, and that might help. Not sure if it's your case, but it's worth a try, right? If you care about poker, if you want to get better, it's worth a try.